this conference, I got to moderate on this stage. So that's good. I've only done 3 talks altogether, and it's always with people that I've known for a long time. So
I think we've known each other for a fair amount of time now. How long do you think it's been?
I don't know. When were your social casino game days? I guess Playcino and
2009-ish. So 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah. And then
2010?
You got distracted by this Bitcoin thing, right?
Yeah, you probably watched some of that. I probably was pitching you like Bitcoin and like during those days.
You were, and I didn't know what it was, and I never really bothered to find out much about it until much later, and that's why I'm still a poor journalist there. So anyway, Brock, can you fill us in more on your background as well, your formal?
Well, where do we want to begin?
You want to start with the Mighty Ducks at all?
If you want, I was a young kid from Minnesota that, due to acting, and moved out here to LA in January of 1994. Decided not to act anymore, but got into entrepreneurship when I was 16, 17 during Internet 1.0. And I had a view that people would eventually film content and upload it to the internet, and that content would be created for the internet. And we started a company that was the first, one of the first, whatever, is credited with sort of pioneering internet video. And so we raised $88 million in 1997, 1998, 1999 to create what you think of today as like YouTube, Hulu, Netflix. The problem with that business is broadband didn't roll out at the rate that analysts had all forecast, and so didn't really work out. But we pioneered words and concepts like webisodes and whatnot. And at that same time, I had been an avid gamer my entire life growing up. We were seeing the beginning of networked games. We were seeing the first games that were persistent in nature, where you could log in and earn rewards and come back, and those rewards would still be there. But they were also multiplayer, and you could buy, sell, and trade, which gave birth to digital economies, which were in some of the original muds and moos like Gemstone, which some of you may have heard of. But the first game I found was called Sanctum. It was a game made by Digital Addiction, and it was basically Magic the Gathering meets chess online. And I became one of the biggest collectors. I had one of the biggest collections of cards in the game, and someone was like, "I'll give you $200 for that Sword of Zarathustra," and I'm like, "Yeah, of course." And people were like, instead of trading, people started wanting to offer me real money for these cards. And so I contacted the game company and I said, "I'd like to buy your virtual packets of cards in bulk to be able to run a singles store. You're the primary market. As the primary market, a secondary market fuels a more robust primary market. So I want to do essentially what exists in the analog world online. Let me be the comic book store. Let me be the baseball card shop." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." And so I cut a deal to buy those packs, and the business was making maybe $50,000 a year. The problem, because the game never got over 5,000 users. But this is back in like 1999, 1998, when I identified that just because something was intangible wouldn't make it any less valuable. Fast forward to the early massively multiplayer games. I wasn't a big Ultima Online user, but I became a very big EverQuest user, and then started a company called IGE, where we made a market in Platinum and the things, and we ended up building a very big, very robust business buying and selling virtual goods and games. We built a supply chain of about 400,000 people in China that would play games professionally to mine digital currency for us. They called that Chinese gold farming. We were PayPal's.
I mean, you could go on for a long time here, but I think they get the point that you just jump on waves. You jump on waves early.
A lot of virtual currency stuff. Bought a company called Xfire to do a bunch of early esports stuff, did social casino stuff. Started a company called ZAM, which we sold to Tencent. Big media property. I've done lots and lots of stuff around gaming. I'm a gamer, though I tend to mostly play the game of life these days.
Yeah. Well, how did you jump on the blockchain wave, the crypto?
Well, because I'd been doing I think Wired called me the godfather of like digital currency, because I was the kingpin of the world's markets.
So virtual goods just led right in.
Yeah, and so everybody would come to me in like 2004, 5, 6, 7, saying, I've got an idea for digital currency. Oh, what about we could build social impact things? Oh, what we could go do this, and we could build community currencies. And I looked at buying the, points.com, and so I was constantly looking at, other markets for these uses. And so when Bitcoin came along, I was contacted, call it somewhat early on, and someone said, Brock, what do you think about Bitcoin? And I was like, because I'm supposed to know everything. I'm like, I'm on another call. Let me call you right back. Research. Call back a little while longer, and it's like, sorry, I really tied up. What was that? And they're like, I was calling about Bitcoin. Oh, yeah, Bitcoin. What did you want to know? And they're like, what do you think? And I'm like, obviously this or something like it is the future. I just don't know if the future is now or 25 years from now. It's a market timing thing. And so I started paying very close attention to Bitcoin the next couple of years. And it wasn't until I saw a critical mass of sort of momentum building. Well, the thing I always struggled with is how do you get from that first phase, from 0 to 1? How do you get from, call it A to B? I can see Z. If ever, I can see a world, digital currency, everything happens, replaces all this. Okay, great. But how do we get to that first phase where you've got 10,000 users that actually all agree that this thing has money, where enough consensus is reached? And what caused that was ultimately things like the Silk Road and gaming, specifically the gambling side of the gaming industry in markets where it wasn't otherwise available. Most of the earliest users of Bitcoin weren't using it because they cared about Bitcoin. It was the only way to get access to the products or services that they were seeking. And so they were only using Bitcoin as a means to an end. But what that did is it created the original lightning in the bottle. It created enough of a spark for a market to emerge. And then shortly thereafter, it wasn't needed much longer. And so I saw that critical mass forming. I said, okay, future's now. And I said, I got to get out of everything I have. And I was probably running, 5, 10 different businesses at that time. And so it's kind of hard to unload them all. But back in 2012, started building companies, and
social casino games was sort of something you exited to go into this.
Well, that was one of the last projects. The last 2 gaming deals. Well, I had 3 principal gaming companies. I was chairman of still the largest virtual currency exchange business in the world, which was principally in Korea. It was called Itemania and Item Bay. We had 95% market share of all game currency trading. We had about 700 employees there at this point when we were still doing this. And we were doing about $1 billion a year. And about 40% of the population of South Korea. Part of that team is who I sent off to start BitThumb, and it kicked off the Korean sort of cryptocurrency market. And I sent off some other teams to go do the same thing in China around that same time, because Bitcoin wasn't really popular yet in either of those markets. But obviously those were my main markets, which is part of the reason why there's such important gaming crypto markets. Most people don't see the correlation. The reason why China and South Korea are the most important crypto markets in the world is because they're the most important secondary markets for game currencies. The learning curve wasn't there. They already were familiar with the fact that these intangible assets have value. The difference between things like cryptocurrency and World of Warcraft gold is one depreciates and one appreciates. One is speculative in a good way. One is something you don't want to hold on to very long, because the game economies have specifically been designed to be hyperinflationary. So people don't invest in game currencies with a go long strategy. There is occasionally, if you really get into the nuances of that market, and as someone that managed a lot of that industry, we did that. And so right before game expansions would be released, so right before World of Warcraft would launch its next expansion, you'd see a temporary uptick in the gold prices across all the servers, varying between 5 and 50% depending upon the demand on that particular server. And that's just knowing that a bunch of people that are not actively playing, because they've gone through all the content of that latest expansion, they're playing, call it just a little bit here and there, keeping their, rolling their guild alive, showing up to raids only, but they've got no more, grinding to do at that point until the next expansion. Everybody comes back into the game as the new expansion is released, and then demand for gold skyrockets, and therefore the price temporarily has a pop. And that's really the only time that it's ever made sense to speculate, on game currencies.
So did you go through your own sort of skeptic stage? I mean, things grew so much in blockchain and crypto. We saw a bunch of scammers come into it. You know, did you ever have an aversion to it because of what was happening there? Like it was feeling like a .com craze or something, or did you just sort of ignore these people?
No, I do my best to try and not drink my own Kool-Aid, and I also do my best not to be blind to kind of the reality around. And I get very nervous when I start to see these things. You know, when you start to see, anytime you have these moments where the price is rising rapidly, it attracts a lot of the wrong people for the wrong reasons. You know, a lot of people are showing up because they're hoping to make a quick buck. Anytime you have a lot of people showing up hoping to get rich quick, but don't know very much, there is an opportunity for, you know, nefarious people to take advantage of that. You know, it creates that perfect situation for really bad actors to show up that know this much, but they know this much more than the person showing up, you know, in search of the, you know, the new gold rush. And those people are unfortunately normally quickly caught up in some sort of scam. And, you know, it's a horrible thing, which is why I'm always preaching and stating, you know, this whole industry is not about, you know, listening to anybody else. Don't do something because I tell you. You know, this is an industry about empowerment. Do something because you've taken the time to become informed enough. You've empowered yourself enough to be able to make decisions for yourself. And go do that. Don't go and like try and buy the next thing. This is the beginning of a long-term trend. You've got plenty of time. Don't let FOMO cause you to make a rash decision that is going to cause you to be parted with your money. If you want to put some money into this space, put $100 in. Go buy $20 worth of 5 of the top 10 coins, and the real learning lesson there is going to be picking which 5 of the top 10 you're most interested in. That lesson, that $100, is not an investment. You're paying for an education. It's going to teach you how to open a wallet. It's going to teach you how to buy the currency. It's going to teach you how to store the currency. It's going to teach you how to get, you know, second tier, top tier, but second tier, top tier currencies. And if it gets hacked and you lose your money, you lost $100. Yeah. That's called welcome. You know, you're welcome to learning. But don't go get caught up in someone pitching you on, hey, and anyone that promises you a return, anyone that tells you something that's too good to be true, it probably is. So I'm very, very happy every time there's a major correction in the market. When the price comes down radically, it's like music to my ears. It sings to me because it's like a cleansing. It causes a purging in the industry that basically gets rid of all of the riffraff, all of the people that are here for the wrong intentions, and things stabilize and we get back to that good phase. As I say, the bull markets produce bullshit and the bear markets bear fruit.
So with games, I think at first you said that blockchain and crypto have to really establish a foundation first. And once they did that, then there would be opportunities for games. I mean, are you feeling this opportunity is upon us now?
I'm sitting here.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll see me at many game conferences these days. I did a lot. I went and pitched a lot of Bitcoin in 2013 at all the gaming conferences I could and all the gambling conferences I could, but as a payment method. I wasn't viewing it as a system to build on top of. You know, went and did that, taught a bunch of people, off I went. This is really kind of the first time I'm starting to make an appearance back at the gaming conferences, and that's because I have an opinion that it's now relevant, it's now time. You know, we're 10 years in. We're just coming out of what I'd call the blockchain prototyping phase. You know, everything to date has really been prototyping in terms of building systems that we can actually build on top of that are scalable. We now have a scalable system where you can start to build games. I mean, that exists today with EOS and Tron in particular, and to a lesser extent Ethereum, though Ethereum was first. But we now have blockchains that you can start to build games on. It is still very, very early days. This is like, imagine if you had access to the iPhone before the iPhone was released, but well, Apple was just giving it to devs in the very beginning. We're essentially at that phase. But if you think the iPhone is going to be a big deal and you're a developer, this is the time you want to go start looking at the iOS operating system, and you want to start thinking about, can I build games for this new mobile phone that Apple is making? I think we're at that moment. Or I think we're at that same moment where Facebook was, where they said, we're going to be opening up our API. The big difference there is Facebook had a very big user base when they did that, so there was substantial distribution, which is a big incentive to go in and start building on top of it, because there's already a walled garden, not a walled garden, but call it a semi-walled garden with lots of users within it that you can start building applications to. Blockchain is a much smaller user base, but potentially a far more interesting opportunity. I mean, this is essentially the Internet 2.0.
So are the game entrepreneurs moving fast enough from your perspective? Like, we have Kevin Chu has come in, Miko is with Gumi Cryptos, and they're starting to get their feet wet. Ubisoft as well, but they're not diving in. They're kind of looking at CryptoKitties and going, that's not a real game. This is not ready yet. So I'm gonna go away for a while.
And in the case of CryptoKitties, I think it was a wonderful project. I'm a huge fan. The problem is the Ethereum network, and I'm a huge Ethereum supporter. The Ethereum network just wasn't ready to scale for games. Ethereum's killer app was ICOs. But we now have the ability to build those apps. You can go take a look at the EOS and Tron chains right now, and in both instances, you're going to see interesting, rudimentary games that have been built. But keep in mind, the app stores just went live. We're talking under a year ago, so we're really talking about 6 months ago, with a radically new development platform where there's a somewhat steep learning curve for developers. So it's really, really early days, but now you're starting to see big name entrepreneurs that are voting with their feet. If they're choosing to go spend their time building there versus everywhere else they possibly could, that is a very important early indicating piece of data that everybody should be paying attention to. The opportunity cost there is tens of millions of dollars to some of these people. That is essentially a personal investment they're making. That's something that may not be a specific data point where you can see the product yet developed, the success of any product and its long-term economic impact, but the effect of someone doing that with their time is not immaterial. It's a big deal. When you start seeing people that can go do anything in the gaming space, do that, pay attention. And so you're seeing people from Blizzard leaving, you're seeing Mythical Games. Well, I was at a Block 1 dinner last night. I hope I'm not saying anything that isn't supposed to be said, but if so, I do apologize. I assume this is somewhat known, and we have someone here in the background. Sam Engelbart is here from Galaxy. But you're seeing these EOS VC funds have started actively investing in game companies. One in particular is Mythical Games, if you've been following it. And the number I think I heard last night of the capital deployed by EOS VC, about 50% of it so far that's been deployed is into games, which means the EOS ecosystem, and specifically the $1 billion of capital that's been allocated to venture investing, as of now, about half of it is going into games. And the entire dinner last night, which wasn't really timed to be around this event, it was timed around a financial event. This happens to be happening. The entire conversation last night at all of this private dinner, it was gaming, 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 with a lot of gaming luminaries present for the dinner, which, again, makes me feel like, the timing is right, but it's very early days. This could take a few years to develop before we see, call it a big, successful app. The things where we're going to see it most likely initially is going to be things like collectible card games. It will be things like CryptoKitties. It's going to be it's more about creative game design, but simpler game mechanics. We're probably not looking at things like massively multiplayer games in the short term, but that's also great if you're a new developer. It's an opportunity to move in quick, fail fast, iterate.
So you're going to watch this happen now, or are you going to actually do some of this sort of company creation here?
Ooh, that's I haven't made that decision, but yeah, under the right circumstances, I could see myself doing something in this space. you know, like if I was going to do something, I'd almost want to like go do a deal with maybe Sony Online Entertainment, because I was a big EverQuest user. And I'd say, let me license a copy of EverQuest, just the original version of the game without the expansions, and figure out some sort of deal and see if I can decentralize the EverQuest game version 1 and, you know, put it on a blockchain, restructure the game economy. So rather than being a hyper-deflationary game economy, be a game economy where everybody pays a subscription fee. And I'm speaking in real time. This is not something I've really ever thought about. You just asked, so like, I'm winging it, flying by the seat of my pants, but something along those lines, so that by playing the game, if you play well, you're actually earning money in the same way that you did if you bought and sold in the secondary market. But the company that was responsible for publishing it and collecting those fees and maintaining it would still be able to have something. But, you know, where you had the game publisher and you had the secondary market. I mean, this is where I became the biggest enemy of Blizzard. I was like there was a period of time back in the day that I was hated by some of the game industry because they thought the idea of people spending money on digital currency was the worst thing imaginable. It was like evil. It was sacrilegious. It was such a horrific thing back in like 2003 and 2004. It eventually became the entire business model of the games industry. Sorry if I had anything to do with that.
It's like the loot box of its day or something.
But that's essentially what happened. But I do believe that this can be done in a way where the players, because it wasn't about me, it's about the publishers and the players winning together, right? It's building a system where the people that are investing time and energy as developers, content creators, everything else, putting all that energy in, are being appropriately remunerated for their contributions. But the players, which are the community, are also able to benefit. I mean, that's essentially what blockchain is all about. So I could envision myself doing that just to kind of like take my entire life in this piece of the world full circle. And so I guess if you know, someone wants to do something along those lines, I'd be open to that conversation, and probably a dozen others. I mean, yes, I imagine I'm a gamer at heart. It just would have to be something really cool, because I don't need to do any of these things, and I'm spread very thin. Yeah. But yeah, I'm a sucker for cool things.
Or you should ignore Brock Pierce at your peril. Just look at me, right? Well, it's yeah, very interesting possibilities here.
Or another option would be building Ready Player One in some sort of hybrid augmented reality type of world where we bury millions of dollars all over the planet, and, you know, all sorts of fun stuff like that, which, you know.
So other people have called you a Bitcoin billionaire. What does the word billionaire mean to you?
Well, I back to measurements, right? KPIs. If life were a game, you know, the question is, how do you, so in role-playing games, specifically massively multiplayer games, they're non-linear. You know, it's not about just getting to the end. You know, there's many character archetypes, as like Richard Bartle would teach you. Why are you playing the game? What is your version of winning? You know, what do you consider to be success? How do you measure your success in your life if this were a game? A lot of people seem to think that success is associated with how much money you've made. And some people, you know, look at like this Forbes 400 list, and that's like some version of success and being on that list. And the KPI some people choose is like wealth. I think that is a very silly key performance indicator and a horrific way to measure success in your life. It doesn't lead to happiness. You know, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, if I make that $1 million, I'm going to be happy. And as soon as they devote, you know, all those years working hard, doing things they don't enjoy doing, making all these compromises in their life that really make them not like themselves, finally they're about to reach that dream, their $1 million, 5, 10, whatever that life goal they had is. They're getting closer to it, and they're really, really miserable, and all of a sudden they get there and they're like, I thought I was going to be happy. So, you know, just use something other than, you know, that most likely. How I measure success in my life is by positively impacting the lives of others. And back to happiness, I've never met a happy person that is very selfish. Every happy person I've ever met, obviously you have to be selfish enough that you take care of your own house. Like if you're on that airplane, put your own mask on first before you take care of others. You have to, you know, make sure that your life is in order. But happiness generally seems to come from looking at and contributing and helping others beyond yourself. And so I measure my success in that way. So a billionaire to me is someone that is positively impacting the lives of a billion other people. And if you think about things like financial inclusion, 2/3 of the world's population doesn't have access to bank accounts or has limited access to bank accounts and financial services. 2/3 of the world's population do not have the basic fundamental tools that we have that allow us to have opportunity. 2/3 of the population of the planet. You know, just at a simple level, forget what blockchain can do, but just cryptocurrency and wallets that are being built on these systems have the potential to democratize the global financial system in a way where every human being on the planet can have equal access. And the least fortunate billions of people stand to benefit the most. Meaning just by being a participant in this movement, you know, you are becoming a part of that tribe that can call yourself a future billionaire in the most positive sense I know.
So billionaire is?
Someone positively impacting the lives of a billion others.
All right, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you.